So, question one is what situation or situations do you feel that police officers are best suited to respond as the first response unit, and why?
Okay, repeat it again.
What situation or situations do you feel that police officers are best suited to respond as the first responders, and why?
So, I'm going to go out on a limb here and go a little bit against what you said in your briefing before the question started.
Okay.
I think that the idea of there being something emergent, whatever it is, and contacting law enforcement, 911, let's say, and having the police and the fire, or specifically the police in this case, show up. The idea behind that is that the police officers would be able to bring a level of calm and orderliness to what may be chaotic. And so I recognize that they may not be, let's say it's a mental health crisis, or it's a suspected mental health crisis. And, you get law enforcement there, and they are not trained in that arena. I can understand why you would desire somebody who is trained in the mental health profession to accompany them. But I do not believe that just the mental health professional alone would be what is needed. Because let's say that happens in the middle of a store, and there's a bunch of people around. And again, like, the police can help keep, ideally, the police can help keep the crowds away. They can restore order and, calmness and things like that. And they are generally trained to not get amped, to not get caught up in it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but the question is, what situations do you feel police officers are best suited to respond as the first response unit?
Yeah. My point is, I think there's always a place for them.
Okay.
Because of their ability. I mean, I understand there's terrible examples in society, but there are in every profession. But ideally, you're calling law enforcement to restore order, or to maintain order, to maintain calmness, and to allow people, like, let's say it's a fire. I want firefighters there, but I want police there to keep people back and, have order and things like that, so that the fire professionals can do what they need to do. So to me, you're never wrong in calling the police.
So then my second question is, what situation do you believe that other groups would be best suited? So your answer to that would be none. Police should always be there.
Well, I mean, if it was a mental health crisis or something like that, then, I think you need to get a counselor or mental health professional to the scene. I think if it's a child, then I think you need to have people there that are prepared and able to communicate with children. But I think in generally speaking, the police do a pretty good job of that. But I recognize that I am answering the questions without much bias. Like, I don't have any examples in my own life of police not being helpful.
Yeah.
But I also recognize that I've seen, maybe due to social media, but I've seen many more examples in my adult years raising children that are concerning. And I'm not saying that never went on, because I'm sure it did when I was a kid too. But when I grew up, I never feared a police officer. And I feel like today, it's like I teach you and your sister, you need to be, police or whatever. Like, you don't need to fear them, but I also don't want you alone with them, if that makes sense, So, anyway, next, whatever's next. Did I answer it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree myself. That's kind of what I wrote about in my response. I was like, I don't think police should ever not be the first response, because their job has always been to assess the situation, and then they're the ones who can determine whether or not what else is needed.
Yeah, and I think
also just based on the sheer fact alone that, like, they carry weapons on them and they wear bulletproof vests, so they have tasers, they have handcuffs, they have ways to control a situation that EMS and firefighters don't.
Law and order, law and order, and they do have, like, hostage negotiators, and they do have people. They do have people on staff. If they're going out to handle something with a child, a lot of times they'll bring, like, a stuffed animal and stuff. Nanny used to like, make teddy bears and stuff, and give them to the police station. Because they do have to go out, and, like, blankets and things like that, they do have to go out and deal with more sensitive populations than the average, 18 to 40-year-old or whatever. So, I just don't think there's ever a situation where I wouldn't want an emergent situation where I wouldn't want police presence.
Yeah. And
that's just me.
And in my answer, I said also, like, alongside them, I do think that just because police officers aren't, like, trained, or they may be trained in certain situations, but they may not always retain that information or practice the information that they've learned. So I think it would be smart, like, if you're responding to a domestic violence situation, I don't think you should just send out a social worker. I think you should send out a social worker with a police officer, so then the police officer can make sure the social worker is safe, but the social worker could deal with the children. If there's children involved, they could deal with the more counseling situation of, like, just the domestic issue, because police might not be able to do that, but they can certainly be a presence in the room.
Well, and I think, to add to your point, you could be a social worker. Like, you could have those skill sets as a police officer, but showing up in that uniform and showing up with that weapon, that is not the look.
Yeah.
You don't look like you're here. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like, where you would bring a social worker in, and they would not be dressed that way.
Yeah,
they would not be carrying a baton and wearing a vest, all those things.
Because some people were like, well, why can't we just let EMS have weapons? And EMS, I don't think it would be a terrible idea for them to have weapons. However, they are in a very confined space, and often there is altercations, especially in mental health crises. The last thing I need is for you to grab the gun off of me and turn it on me or you.
It's the same reason we wouldn't want doctors or nurses.
Yeah. And then firefighters,
carrying weapons. That's just not.
Yeah. Yeah. When have you ever heard a bad thing about a firefighter? Never. Yeah. So let's keep it that way. Like, they're the good citizens. Like, their job isn't, like, whatever.
Law and order.
Yeah. They fight fires. That's what they want to do. They deal with fire hoses and fire hydrants.
Yeah. And doctors and healthcare professionals are meant to bring peace and calm. And
although I wouldn't think it would be a terrible idea for an ambulance driver to maybe have a weapon, but then we would need to employ that, which also leads me into my next question. Oh, well, I guess I have to ask this one next. Are there any groups that you think would benefit from a non-police response unit? But we kind of already talked about that, like domestic violence.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Like the first ones on the scene, it might be helpful for other people.
Yeah, I don't know about domestic violence. I feel like if you're calling and that attacker is still there, I absolutely think law enforcement should be there.
Yeah.
Police should be there. But I would say maybe children.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly if someone was deemed to be, mentally ill, those types of situations. But again, I really just kind of fall on the side of, I think they always have a place.
The only place I think that like non-response from police first, like the first ones on the scene, would be like an overdose situation, because often, like, police can get there eventually for sure, but I think EMS should really be the first, or just like crisis counselors.
Well, and to be
Because
perfectly
people get
honest,
scared when they're on drugs and they're like, I'm gonna go to jail for being on drugs, but so then EMS can't actually do their job first. Like, they have to, like, de-escalate the situation before they can get Narcan in them. Or then when they
well,
do get
it's,
Narcan in them and then the people wake up, they're like running away and they're like, we have to check you out.
well, I mean, I don't know, because again, thank God I haven't had to utilize it, but I think when you call 911 and you tell them what your emergency is, it's the emergency personnel on the other end of the phone that's determining what assets are being sent.
I mean, to a certain degree, yeah. But I think it would probably, just for that situation alone, maybe we send EMS first.
Mm-hmm.
Or a crisis counselor with EMS. And then once EMS gets there, they can assess the situation and be like, I'm not getting out of this ambulance until police get here. And stuff like that.
Okay, next question.
And then, what challenges exist to change our system from a police first model to any alternative? And in your response, consider the local, state, and national issues that might be involved.
Okay, read the first part again.
What challenges exist to change our current system from a police first model to any alternative? Like, whatever alternatives you might come up with. There's none listed. It's just your brain.
Well, I think education, right, on what police actually can do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, is that like our, nuclear button? We just press it and expect them to come? Because that's the way we've been taught.
Mm-hmm.
So I think education probably mostly about what it is, when is the right time to call the police, would be one thing. And then, I mean, I think other things are just your own, kind of personal, biases. I mean, I recognize that there's, some police forces I guess everybody's got corruption to a certain degree, but, there's some police forces that have, across the nation, that have gotten really bad raps, for, targeting maybe one particular race or one particular, area of town or, something like that. And so I think that, we have to, as with anything, we have to recruit, quality people and have to educate and to help change the perception. I grew up in a world thinking that if I call the police, they're going to come and help me, not that they're going to come and arrest me.
Yeah.
But I'm white, and I'm female, and I'm middle class.
Mm-hmm.
Why would I think that you would be coming to arrest me? I have no reason to believe that you would be coming to arrest me, unless I did something that I knew was absolutely wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that's the perception for everybody in this country. So, I mean, really, my answer is education. Education about what it is they do and how they can serve and help situations where they should be called.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other piece of the education would just be, to try to change maybe some of those perceptions. And I think communities are doing, I see, reports on the news about, police going into some of those communities where they do feel pitted against the residents of a community for whatever reason.
Yeah.
But that really just kind of falls under the same thing, education. But you got to have good people. You got to have good people on your force. So, any more questions?
Nope, that's it.
Okay.